and then went down, and it came down into the, at least one of the spurs of the railroad came down into the Exposition grounds themselves. It was a small gauge railroad, and here's one of the engines from the railroad, and it carried folks from downtown all the way down to the Exposition Hall. It would have taken, I think at one time it went over to Wash Park. I'd have to go back and read. It was supposed to make a full loop and come back in the east side of downtown. And the east part of it was never completed. But part of, I think about 2/3 of the railroad was completed. They had lots of problems. They eventually went bankrupt in 1898. The railroad ran from 1882 to 1898. They ran down some neighborhood streets. The neighbors hated the train, and they did everything they could to get rid of it, and they finally did. So this has nothing to do with anything. I just included it because I ran across it in my pictures. This is one of the Broadway trolleys. So the trolley line would have run alongside the train line down South Broadway for a time. But this is the trolley that would have run south from downtown into our neighborhood. Doesn't that look, it just looks so sweet and rural and bucolic. I can't imagine that in this area these days. So this is a picture probably most of you have not seen. This is the original South Broadway church building. And over here to the right is the one corner of Henrietta and John Sutton's house. So John and Henrietta had, I think, 5 or 6 lots on South Broadway. And when the church was started, John offered the property to the church, and they put a semi-permanent tent up. They said it leaked a lot, but it did have some sense of permanence. They had furnishings and all. So here's the inside of the tent. So that's the original church. We have 5 or 6 of those original chairs up in one of our rooms, and we have this communion set right here, and we have the piano over here. So we still have several things that came out of that tent. But the tent is an important part of our church history, and the church met there for about 2.5 years while they were waiting for the building to be completed. So this is where the tent would have stood, to give you an idea, right next to Three Kings Tavern. Here's the Werner Building at 80 South Broadway. That's where the Sutton's house would have been at the time. So a lot of people ask us, why is your church called South Broadway Christian Church when it's on North Lincoln? And this is why. The neighborhood at the time, as it is now, was known as South Broadway. So the name was emblematic of a neighborhood rather than a specific location. But when the church was started, John Sutton had intended for the church to be built right here next to his house along Broadway. And the rumor circulated in our church for years that John wanted the church there, but it was already becoming commercial, and the church elders didn't like it, and they wanted it in a bit quieter area. Well, that's not true. After doing some research, I found that the Denver Circle Railroad line ran right here in front of the church, or where the church would have been located. And to compound that, on the back side of the property behind John's house, there was a lumber yard, and the lumber yard had a railroad spur that came down the alley behind this location and into their lumber yard. So the church would have had a railroad line in front of it as well as behind it. And there was some, the church knew that John wanted the building there, and it seemed to be a very delicate situation from what I can tell from our history, that they were able to get him to agree to move it. So the church had a couple of other options. One of the other options came from Barbara Kettle, and Barbara lived at the corner of Broadway and Ellsworth, and she offered the church a building spot in her development. So she owned some lots north of 3rd Avenue on the east side of Broadway, so just north of where the church is now. And she said, if you want to build there, I'll give you the lot. And the church declined because John wanted the church building a little further south down in this neighborhood. So they ended up finding the nice corner where we are now at the corner of Lincoln and Ellsworth. Just a little PR. Here's a photograph from the inside of the church at the building dedication in 1892. My God, can you believe the stencil work? Every time I look at this picture, I'm like, it sends my ADD over the edge. Lots going on in there. And then another photograph from the building. This is looking east on Ellsworth, across Lincoln. And just for so John's apartment was in this part of the building right here. So this would have been his bedroom, and this area would have been his living room. So he had 2 rooms up on the 2nd floor above the south entryway of our building. And then another view, we think that's from 1908, view from the Broadway side. And because I have to do PR for my congregation, it's not a super current view of the space, but it's pretty much what it looks like today. That's about a 5 or 6 year old picture, I think. And then just a little, to give credit where credit is due, the West Washington Park Neighborhood Survey and History Report, part of it says 2006, this one's dated 2002. Lots of good information in there, as well as the town of South Denver. I had a hard time finding this book. If anybody wants to borrow it, I'll be glad to loan it out. If you can acquire it, it's well worth a few bucks to pick up a copy. It will teach you tons about how our part of town came to be. It's the best resource that I've found so far. And then just a little, not that I would ever be political in my work, but I was just going to show you Bernie outside of the church offices. Makes me happy that I could look at Bernie from my office right here. I didn't happen to see him when he came by, and I was a little concerned about him out here in the street, but I was glad that he came to say hello to us. I had to share those. And one more quote. So Mayor of South Denver, 1892, Mayor Shattuck, regarding annexation, said, "The city of Denver will license saloons and South Broadway will soon be lined with dives of the worst order." That has got to be the most prophetic statement I've ever heard anyone make. So I thought that was kind of funny. Thought I would share it. I think I more than covered everything. Is there any questions about anything?
This is incredible. I've never seen such amazing photos of the mining exposition. And in one of our presentations on the businesses of South Broadway, I actually found a map. I think it was either the Sanborn or the Based map that showed the tent city or the tent church there drawn on the map. So it's incredible that you guys can show a picture of it.
Yeah, we've got just the one outdoor picture and one indoor picture. The outdoor picture was taken by W.H. Jackson, the famous photographer. So the picture of the tent. And then we've got a couple of them from inside our building were also taken by famous photographers of the time. I have tons more with not of those where that came from. I couldn't believe, like, when I got to digging, I have so many pictures. I'm going through all of my photos right now, and I'm trying to get, I'm building an online repository of church and neighborhood photographs. So it's not up yet. Well, it is up, but it's still quite incomplete. But if you go to SBCC, South Broadway Christian Church, sbcchistory.org, sbcchistory.com. That will take you to our photo page. And I think by the time I'm done, I mean, of course, tons of these are church photos, may not interest you at all, but I think by the time I'm done, I'll have about 10,000 pictures up there. I mean, it's an insane amount I've been working on this close to 10 years. So there'll be a good community resource available. And I'll include these kinds of pictures on the site as well. So they'll be up eventually.
Thank you. I do have a question. So was there any history or documentation about why they chose that specific style of architecture? I think it's.
No, we do know that our pastor, there was a rumor at one time that they sent the pastor to Europe to pick out plans. And I said, that's crazy. No pastor starting a church is leaving for a tour of Europe while their church is getting off, and no one would do that. So come to find out, they sent him back east, and they sent him to several cities in the Midwest that were kind of up and coming cities like Denver. And he toured churches and found a style he liked. The architects that designed our building did not originate the plans, and we know that because there were at least four in the United States that we know of that were built off of the same plan. So there's one in Colorado Springs that's a twin in downtown Colorado Springs. It's in brick. It doesn't look like ours, but it does from the inside. And then there's one on Long Island, and then there was one in Mississippi as well. So we know it was a stock plan. They found a plan that they liked, and it's built in Richardson Romanesque. It was a super contemporary. It was what people were building at the time. And the church had a lot of money, and they built the most beautiful thing that they could because they had all the money they wanted to do it. We are not that church today. As much as I wish I could say, yes, we are still that church. We are not, but we do our best to maintain this grand space that we are entrusted with. And we believe in sharing it. We share with the community any way that we can, and any way that we can be a collaborator with work that goes on with this group or with other groups in the community, we're there. So
amazing.
Just in case anybody needs us.
We did have a presentation on kit houses and pattern homes. And one of the discoveries you made was there was churches and storefronts and schools, yep, and whatever, fire stations, whatever you wanted in these pattern kits or pattern
absolutely
plans and kit buildings.
Yep.
So that's amazing to hear that maybe our church was part of that as well on the street.
It was part of that. They were all different. These four all ended up very different. The buildings all look very different, but if you look closely, you can tell. I will say the United Methodists in the 1870s to 90s they built dozens and dozens and dozens of churches across the United States, all in the same plan. And I only found this out because the church where I grew up was torn down before I was born, but my grandmother would talk about how much she loved it. And it was just such a beautiful building, and it was intimate, and you could see everybody. And I was driving through the San Luis Valley, in Salida. And I was like, holy crap, that is the church where my mom, it was the same thing where my mom grew up. And I did some research, and sure enough, the Methodists they built tons and tons and tons of these. So yes, that's absolutely right. Just like a house, churches did the exact same thing.
Amazing. Do you guys have any questions for Dustin before we move on to Carolyn?
No, I was just very impressed. That was really fun to listen to.
Oh, good. I love being with fellow history nerds. I love this community today. I think it's the best community in the whole world. There's no place I'd rather be. I just really think it's the heartbeat of Denver right now. And I love the history, but I love where we're going even better. So it all fits together nicely.
And Dustin, thank you for making this site about the South Broadway Christian Church as well with all of these photos. I grew up Catholic, and I've always been fascinated by just churches in general because of that, and I'm really excited to dive deeper into this. So thank you for doing this. It's wonderful.
Sure. Catholics find themselves very comfortable in our space because it's warm, but it's formal. So we find a lot of folks that have come to our church have come from a Catholic. I'm not evangelizing. Don't get me wrong, but we find a lot of people are, they're drawn there by the beauty, and the inside is so much warmer. It's a much warmer, more comfortable space inside than it is outside. So one of these days, come by, and I'll be glad to give you a socially distanced tour, or look for a sign out on Saturday this summer, and we'll be glad to show you around.
Yes, I definitely will within the next few weeks. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Hi, Dustin. I really appreciate the pictures. It was a great presentation. I was wondering, I noticed the church building, I guess the church offices next to the actual church is probably like a 1950s building. And then there's a vacant lot that you must use next to that. And I was curious whether there were buildings on there or if it was vacant for a while and the offices were built, and maybe you could just say the history of that.
There were 6 houses north of the church. And over the years, the church bought one house across the street in the 50s, tore it down, built a parking lot. And then they bought the house where the education building is, and they used it as an education building for about 10 years, and then tore it down and built a bigger one. They were rushed because there'd been a zoning change that was going to require parking. And so the church found out literally months in advance, and had to they tore the house down and pulled the new building together as quickly as they could, because they didn't have any parking. So they were trying to get around the zoning. And then over the years, they bought, there were two houses where our park is, and 3 houses where our north parking lot is. And they bought those in the 60s and 70s. And you can go through our business meeting records, and one of the houses they paid $20,000 for, in the church they just groaned and complained about the expense. How are we ever going to bear $20,000 to buy that decrepit house next to the church building? So, but unfortunately, I wish they had not torn them all down. There were some really lovely houses. There's one photograph on the Denver Public Library website that shows some of the houses that stood along there, and they're in the background of the church. We have a couple of good photographs of the house that was right next to the church where our education building is now. So it was pretty plain, but.
Neat.
Would love to see those.
And
they're getting posted eventually.
Great.
Yeah, I'd love to see those too. It's funny. I went to a liberal arts college called Ohio Wesleyan, and the main building on campus is a Richardsonian Romanesque building, and that was what was in my head when you were mentioning that was the church. And so I don't know, it's just kind of ironic, but I think it was probably, like you said, more that building was, I'm sure, built around like 1880s, late 1880s or so. So that was the
early 1890s.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the all 4 of the churches built on this plan were built between 1890 and 1895, and the company was an architecture firm out of New York. And the best we can tell are some local architects that were only here for a couple of years bought it and expanded on the plans. So they appear to have done all the stonework and finishes. They didn't do the structure of the building, but they did all the design stuff. And it came together pretty beautifully, except for that god-awful stencil work that every time I look at that picture, it just gives me a headache to look at. I'm so glad they painted over it. I hate to say it, but I am. But
it reminds me from like 80s or 90s, my mom would buy those like ivy stencils. Do you guys remember that? That's what it reminded me of. It's just somebody up there with like sponge painting.
Mm-hmm. They did tell us our building was finished in about 16 months from start to finish, from the time they started the basement to completion. They said there must have been an army of folks working on the building at the time. Uh-oh, I'm frozen. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad I at least got through. My computer tends to freeze up about 15 or 20 minutes into presentations for whatever reason. But anyway, I don't remember where I was going. Go ahead.
Mary, did you have any questions or comments, or Tiaja?
Just wanted to say it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, we have Carolyn Diana, who's going to present on our next subject today. Go ahead. And then
Which is just my house. It's not, it's not as big a thing. Okay, now I've got to figure out how to share my screen. I haven't done that from my iPad before. So
And Brittany, just to interrupt for a second, you'll need to make her a co-host for her to be able to share the screen.
Yep, she is.
Okay, great.
Share content. I've got to figure out how to do this. Okay. Everything on your screen. Okay, I think. Okay, you are sharing your screen. Great. Let me, so are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yep.
You got my house up there?
The history of my home. Yes.
Okay, because I now can't see any of the Zoom stuff at all. So I can't see me, I can't see, but okay. So this is my house.
I cannot see your house. I'm not sure why. But go ahead.
I can see it fine.
So it should be a picture of my house to one side and then it says the history of my home on the other side.
Yes, I see that.
And there is my house. So I'm at Pennsylvania and Virginia. And when we bought the house, what they said was that it was Mission Revival is what they called it, which, I mean, that's got the parapet there. So maybe vaguely mission. Since then, we've gone to a guy who has done a lot of historic lighting. And I showed him the picture of the outside of the house, showed him some pictures of the inside of the house, as he was trying to help us pick some lights, some antique lights to go in the house. And what he said was that, no, your house is not Mission Revival. He said, you've got that outline. So your house looks a little bit like the Alamo, but he said, he said, your staircase is more Edwardian. You've got these columns, there's your more colonial revival. He said, so he pointed out this and this and this and this and all of these different, and he said, what you are, he said, you are a eclectic revival. So now I know we're eclectic revival. But it was built in 1904. I am having trouble finding a lot of detail about the building permit, but first I'll just take you on a tour of the house. So this is the entryway. To the right here, facing the piano, that's the front door. So that's the entryway. We've got these columns to the right and left, and we've got a window seat over there with stained glass in it. And then as you turn from the entryway back to where the other picture was taken from, you see this really ugly 70s light hanging there, which we will be getting rid of with something more period appropriate. And I love the fireplace. The fireplace it's just nice that it hadn't gotten scraped at any time. Oops, over there it goes, over the years. pocket doors. And at the top of the fireplace are two of these super cool little lion's heads, which I think are really neat. And then through the pocket doors there, well, there's the hardware on the pocket doors, which I just like. And then through the pocket doors, that's the drawing room with a built-in cabinet at the end. And then that's so we've got the stained glass in the, to the right is that window seat with the stained glass in the entry. To the left, the upper is the stained glass above the front window, and then the lower is the stained glass in the kitchen. So I just thought a good way to start talking about the history of the house was show you a little bit of the house. It was all built in 1904, which was the same year as the St. Louis World's Fair, which I also thought was neat. But so this is the 1904, the Sanborn insurance map. I have been looking for the building permit for this, and I've been going through the library website on that. I found what I think might be, but it doesn't have a legal description on it. It just says, all it says is the corner, there's two permits that were pulled by the same person, and they say corner of Virginia and Pennsylvania. So maybe it's both houses. Maybe, as you can see to the east, those are empty lots, and those stay empty lots for a while. My house is the corner to the north, and then there's a house that's corner to the left. If those permits could be for my house, could be for their house, could be for both houses, I don't know, because there's no legal description on it. So I'm still working that. But this is, I at least found the map with it on it. And the fact that it's all empty across the street is, I thought, was interesting, because it stays empty there for a while. That's the Sanborn map. And then there's the based, which that, you can see the 107 block there. Again, the three pink houses at the corner of Penn and Virginia right there, with mine being the one right smack on the corner, and no houses at all across the street. But both that last one and this, the other one was 1904. This is the 1905 map. And then, so this, the first person I have record of, and this is the 1907 Corbett and Ballinger listing. I actually found him in the 1904, the 04, the 05, the 06, 07 is this fellow right here, who is Ferdinand B. Wilson, Chief Clerk, Freight Department of the Burlington Route Railroad, which, so him and his wife, Rachel, lived in the house for the first few years. I don't know whether they were renting or whether they're owning, because of when the house was built, and they only lived in it for a short while, so they were never there during a census. So I haven't figured out for sure whether they were. I know that for a while, because I found that him also, her brother lived with them for a while, and he was a stenographer. I found him, but they just, because of where they fell around the census, I don't know whether they were renting or whether they were owning. And I don't know, because I can't find the building permits. And so I'm missing a lot of paperwork at the start. So I don't know if they could have built it. They could just be renting. They could have, I don't know. So they're a little bit of a mystery to me. And so I'm working that still. that this is the stock certificate for the Burlington route. Was the kind of the just the vernacular to refer to the Quincy Burlington, I mean the Chicago, Burlington and Quincy Railroad. Everybody called it the Burlington route. And this was a canceled stock, canceled in 1897, which I got for 20 bucks on Etsy because I thought, oh, that's so cool. I need to have that up and hang that in the house because, you know, Ferdinand worked for them. So it's just like I also, since it was built in 04 and 04 was the St. Louis, sorry, the World's Fair in St. Louis. I found a souvenir plate from the World's Fair from 04. And also, it turns out you can get those pretty darn easy on Etsy, 25 bucks. So now I've got the souvenir plate in the living room, hanging on the wall from the World's Fair from the year the house was built, which I thought was fun. So this is the Denver Public Library. They have the Fairmount Sexton records for burials for the cemetery. Now, so like I said, I couldn't find, they weren't on a census while they were living in my house, but I found them on censuses before and after. And on the census before, there was listed 3 children with them. And it said that they had 4 children, 3 living. And later on in a census, she was listed as having had 1 child and only 1 child and it not living. So I'm not sure what happened to those other 3 kids, whether they were relatives staying with them, whether they were, but it doesn't, I don't show any place else that they had any more than the 1 child. Now, my thought, which I'm still trying to find details on, is here we've got Rachel listed when she died in 34. You've got Ferdinand B. when he died in 1931. Whoops, sorry. And then because they said she had 1 child and it was not listed. Up above, there is a baby Wilson with the initials FB, which would seem to me to refer to Ferdinand B. Wilson, stillborn, female in 1905. I'm looking for more details, but I'm betting that that was theirs. So I don't know for sure, but I think that was their little girl. So sort of sad, but yeah, I like the details. The more you dig in and the more you find out, it makes these people come to life for me. You know what I mean? So also the fact that they were both at Fairmount, I just wanted to see a little bit more about them, even though they left the house. I don't know exactly. I think about 08. But this was when he died in 1931. He had gone to California for his health, but I like that Mr. Wilson had been an employee of the Burlington Railroad for 44 years, all but 2 of which were spent in the Denver office. So this railroad, and the fact that the house looks a little bit like a railroad station, I thought that was very cool. And that his services were Olinger. That's just another neat connection. And then his wife lived for an additional 3 years. And there's her. She had an article. They both had articles about them. Him because he died in California and was brought back. Her because she was found dead in her home, and they figured that she'd been dead for about 5 days. That her neighbors became suspicious when they hadn't seen her for a few days, and they went to investigate, and they found her in her bed, but that it appeared to be natural causes. That you don't usually have that much detail about people back then, because usually they're not dying in California and being shipped back or being found dead in their bed. So it was interesting that there was a little more detail about the two of them. So that was the first people in the house were Ferdinand and Rachel. And then, let's see, this is the 08. Oh, this is still them. This is just them in the 08 directory. And I believe oops, went the wrong way. There it is at the bottom. Chief Clerk, Freight Department for the Burlington route. I just thought that I don't think I'd mentioned. Of course, not having any idea about any of the railroad connection with this. I am like a railroad fanatic. I volunteered for a while when we lived in Sacramento at the California State Railroad Museum. The man who ran the California State Railroad Museum, the director at the time, he designated those of us who were, he didn't call it passionate, he called us foamers. So the people who he said that when they started talking trains, foamed at the mouth. So that's the category that he sorted me into. So the fact that my house has train connections, I think, is the absolute bee's knees. All right, so this is the list of grantors and grantees. So I don't find anything before for the Wilsons, for any of the stuff that went on before. The first time I find anything is for 1904, when Joseph Hoffman bought the house, which there he is right in the middle there, Joseph J. Hoffman. And so with that, I was able to pull up the deed where Joseph Hoffman bought the house. So the deed is to the left there. And then I zoomed in a little bit on the pertinent part. And he is buying it here from John Cruz for $4,500 in 1909. John Cruz, so I finally found this is the first time I saw that name at all. That name doesn't show up on any of the directories that I have found so far. I don't know if he owned the house and was renting it to the Wilsons. I don't know if he only had the house for a short time after the Wilsons, but before the Hoffmans, because you see here that it says that this was being transferred. Everything was free and clear, except here it says, except a trust deed dated May 11th, 1908 for $2,000. So John Cruz had this trust deed on the house dated 1908. So I don't know if that's when he bought the house or whether that was financing on the house. There's just, it's still a mystery there. That John Cruz actually lived on Pennsylvania as well. He shows up in the directory as living at 30 Pennsylvania in 1909. So there's some stuff there that still needs to be figured out and tracked down. But I like the mysteries. And what's interesting is he lives for a long time. He doesn't die till 1966. He actually was living in Indiana at the time when he dies, but he was actually brought back and buried in the Crown Hill Cemetery in Denver. So I know a little bit about him, but I don't know how really he's connected to the house yet. And then this is just a 1950 15 Corbett and Ballingers that show the Hoffmans now. And where is he? Oh, he's at the top of the page here. Joseph J. Hoffman. He had president of Raymond and Hoffman Packing and Provisions Company. And then his residence at 491 South Pennsylvania. So Raymond and Hoffman was a meat packer up on Market Street. And at that point in time, it was Raymond and Hoffman, and eventually it just became Hoffman Packaging and Provisions Company. And his wife was named Lizzie, actually Elizabeth, but in everything she went by Lizzie. And then this is History of Colorado, Volume 3. And from 1918, and they actually list Joseph Hoffman and his family as in what they considered their up and coming people at the time, which I thought was cute and neat. That's there. He talks about at this point it was no longer. He didn't have a partner any longer. It was just Hoffman Packing and Provision Company. It gives a little bit of history about him. It talks about his family. It's just, he bought out the business of Raymond and Hoffman at its present location, 1743 Market Street. He married to Miss Elizabeth Pass of Denver, daughter of George Pass, who were pioneer people of this city. But she goes by Lizzie, and everything else that I've seen is she goes by Lizzie. And it's cute at the end. It's the way this is written back then, 1918, that his business career has been marked by that steady progress, which is the result of energy and sound judgment. And while he started out in life empty-handed, he is now one of the prosperous representatives of the meat industry at the Capitol. So we've got a railroad man and a meat packer. This next thing is from just 2 years later. This is from federal hearings. There we go. Hearings before the Committee on Agriculture at the House of Representatives 66th Congress from 1920. And what they were doing here is this was all records of antitrust and anti-competitive practices that were going in the meatpacking industry. And over here, you'll see at the very bottom of the page, Hoffman Packing and Provisions Company of Denver, local slaughterers alleged forced to discontinue slaughtering because of unfair method of big packers. So the big packers were, they were using monopolistic practices and driving out, and there's pages and pages of little meat packers who, most of them were able to continue being packers, but they could no longer be and some of them went out of business altogether, but a lot of them had to can cease the slaughter part of it because the big packers were flexing their muscles and making it so the little people couldn't compete, which I thought was just an interesting tidbit because this is 1920. They're still living in our home. They lived in our house for a long time. Then this is just them on the one page is actually to the left is their listing in the household directory at our place, and on the right is the Hoffman Packing and Provisions. So the packing and provisions was still a going concern in 1926, and they were still living in our house. And then this, he actually filed for 2 patents. One, a collapsible mold for pressing meat, and the one I show here to the left, it shows the listing one is a collapsible mold for pressing meats and other food products, and a semi-collapsible mold. These are 2 patents that he was granted. So that's the alphabetical list of patents to the left. And then to the right here, there is his picture of the patent he was given for the semi-collapsible mold for pressing whole hams. Joseph J. Hoffman of Denver. And they're still living in our house at that point, which I also just thought was cool. But I thought that showed a level of passion for his business and a level of technical expertise that I thought was really impressive to have filed for 2 patents. And then this is the only picture I have of my house. And, it's an aerial picture. It's the 1933. I have been hunting and I'm not having any luck so far. But so this is the aerial coverage pictures of Denver from 33 on the library website. And that right there in the middle, this right smack in the middle at the corner, that is the roof of my house. And that's as good a picture as I have at the moment. But yeah, I was just tickled to find that. Now, let's see here. The 1933, again, it's just, they're still living in our house, and Hoffman Packing Provisions is still going on down on Market Street. That's what those 2 listings are. All right, so in 1941, this is the for some reason, and I don't know why, this is the to the left here, this is the transfer of the deed from Joseph to Lizzie. That for some reason they've transferred the deed from him to her. But if you see right here, for the amount of that the witness that they pay so she paid $1 and love and affection. That's what she paid for the house to get transferred to her name. It says that for the consideration of the sum of $1, $1 and no 100ths and love and affection. And I thought that was the sweetest thing I'd ever seen. I don't know why at that point they transferred it into her name. I haven't figured that out yet, but that was just so cute. So that was in 41. He doesn't die. Joseph Hoffman doesn't die for another 6 years or so. So they were still living in our house for a while. Maybe he had gotten sick. I don't know. But then it doesn't pass from the Hoffmans until 1948, at which point it's sold for $10 and other good and valuable considerations. So I don't know what those other good and valuable considerations were, or if there was some connection, if she was a relative. I haven't figured that out yet. Because, the house sold for $4,500. There goes a train. $4,500 back in 1909. So it was, of course, obviously worth more, a whole lot more than $10. So I don't know. This is a unusual deed, but I haven't got that figured out yet. There's a lot of mysteries involved in this house. And that is the last slide I have about it. And that's where I am. I'm at 1948 and still figuring it out.
Amazing. Great job. This is hilarious. It seems like this Hoffman guy was kind of a character, like to play jokes, or was probably pretty jolly if he's putting that information on the deeds,
Yes, that he was, there we go, that he was transferred it to his wife for $1 plus love and affection. I thought, oh.
That's so cute. And I was looking too, it was kind of interesting on one of your slides, right above it, it had a, what was it? It was like a paned glass window guy for a big advertisement right above the name. So it's always interesting to see like who may have been doing some of these stained glass windows, or some of the details that we see, like what companies. Maybe it was them, I don't know. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
It's funny, you start to feel like you know these people, and it makes me, I want somebody at some point put a brass plaque on the front of my house that says no soliciting, which I really hate. So I want to name the house. So, and replace this stupid no soliciting plaque with a plaque that says something like the Wilson Hoffman House or something like that. So, but yeah, I talk to all these people as I've been going through this. I'll go into my husband and say, Joe and Lizzie were da 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 da, and he said, "Who are Joe and Lizzie?" I know these people.
They're your buddies. They're your friend.
Yeah.
Talk to them all the time. Think about them. Wish them well.
Yeah.
What are they talking about now?
Oh, this gal is finishing up.
That was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's still a lot of questions, and I wish I had a picture of the house from an earlier time. I would love to have a picture. So I'm hoping that I can trace out and see if I can find great grandchildren or somebody that I could reach out to and say, you wouldn't happen to have, I live in the house your great grandmother lived in. You wouldn't happen to have any pictures, would you? I know that's going to sound weird to them, but.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I found somebody on eBay who had what she was advertising of a late 1800s costume from Paris, and she was selling it out of Denver. And I contacted that person. I was like, do you happen to know where it came from? The person who lived in my house was a French costumer, and she was famous in the mid 1800s. So no amount of stalking into, I think, this group is weird.
It's totally worth asking. I had a call years ago. I worked I worked in the Benjamin Moore paint building down at 25th and Walnut. And I got a call one day from a woman who's, she said, my grandmother ran a beauty shop across the street from your building in the 1940s. And she said, our family doesn't have any pictures of this beauty shop. And she said, you guys were across the street. I wondered if you might have something. So I said, okay, I said, I'll go through our archives. Let me see if I can find anything. And I found one picture out of and it's in, an indirect, it's faced down towards her beauty shop, which was the focus of it. And I went and had that blown up. I got her a regular sized picture and a blown up picture of her grandmother's or great grandmother's beauty shop. So you never know. I mean, it's always worth going, asking questions and digging, because you could run into somebody nerdy like us that loves that kind of thing. And I love when people in the community call and say, hey, I had a family member that was part of your church. Do you know anything about them? And I had one recently, a woman sent us a letter and sent us a bulletin from 1904, strangely enough. And she said, I'm sure nobody there would remember my grandfather. And I said, I know exactly who he is, because I can point you to pictures in our archives. So, yeah, and he'd been dead 70 years. So it's all about finding the right person.
Okay, I'll go back.
No.
And thank you for bringing up that 1933, those aerial pics. I didn't know about that. And I thought I knew all of the little tips and tricks for digging up information on buildings. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, yeah. That's when I saw that, I said, at last there is a picture. It's only our roof, but it's a picture.
Yeah, for sure. My house has been, not the one I live in now. We own a house in West Denver, has been moved. We know it was in a different place on the lot. So I'm going to be digging into that as soon as I get off the call here. I want to see if I can find that.
Well, Carolyn, I really liked the presentation. I love how all these stories intertwine. I find that so interesting. And I also loved your idea of getting different mementos that, the 1904, plate from the St. Louis World's Fair, when, I just thought about my house and how I could do better decorating. That might not be a bad idea, just to get some ideas. I really like that. And then I have to say, I couldn't help, because sometimes when we have all these discussions, I go on Google Maps just to kind of see where I am. And I went to your Google Map view, and it looks like the balcony you have on the front of the house on the second story, it's not on the Google Street View. So I was curious if that got added by you guys, or if that got added right before you moved in, or?
No, we put it on.
Okay.
But when we moved in, there were stubs of a balcony there.
Yes.
So somebody had taken a balcony off.
Right.
And there was a door.
Right.
There's that door. So
right.
There was a door that went to nowhere.
Right. Because I was like, that's a little dangerous.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So we tried to make the balcony look like it belonged.
Oh
there.
yeah. I wouldn't even be able to tell. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But thank you very much. This is really neat. And actually, I forgot the Sanborn maps that you were showing. Were those just something you got from the Denver Public Library? I know we've talked about that about 20 times, but I just can't remember.
They're also on Library of Congress. So
Library of Congress.
LOC.gov, you can search Sanborn.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow.
They don't have them all, though.
Right.
So I think your house is a little bit later. It's like the 20s, right?
Yeah, my house is from the 20s. Yeah, right. But
all of those they have not digitalized.
Yeah, right.
The important ones, of course.
Right. Cool.
But Carolyn, all that stuff, was that a request from the library that you received a lot of those scans?
Some of it was off of Ancestry, some of it was off of Google. There were the obituaries for Ferdinand and Rachel. Those were from the library. So yeah, a little bit all over the place.
Did they pull it for you?
Yes, they did. That was just in January. I was able to find them in an index that there were articles there. It just didn't say what they were, but that said that those names were in those papers. So I could ask for a particular paper. It was the Rocky Mountain News, a particular day, a particular page. And so they went in and photocopied and emailed it to me.
Did they charge you for that by chance? I had like a list of 30 that I wanted,
Well, my list wasn't very long. My list was, I think 8 altogether. There was 4 for him and 4 for her. And so they didn't charge me for that. No.
great. So maybe if you find a specific timeline, Matt, maybe they can scan it for you or take a picture.
Yeah. Well, and I was even thinking for the presentation I'm going to do in a few months, I would love to find a few Sanborn maps too, and that might work. But I just need to do some digging. So
Amazing.
Has anybody heard a projected opening date for the library by chance?
Oh, I have. So I emailed asking about some things from the Western History and Genealogy. And he sent me a really depressing note back. He said, well, I just got word they're going to be closing our department until 2023 for renovations. Right?
No.
I know. That was the worst. So get the request in now.
Oh,
I
that
know.
is my favorite. That is my spot. I've been waiting for them to open.
Of our club, we were talking about we could potentially do like a field trip and all of us go together and just like, peruse the whole library and things like that. And this is when you were thinking, COVID's going to stop anytime.
Yep.
So
we'll have to
Oh,
post
and
it.
you can't look at microfiche online. You know what I mean?
Right. That's right.
So that's a bummer. Like you can look at other resources, but I maxed out South Gaylord resources just online. So I need to go in person.
Yeah.
So that's a bummer.
That makes me very sad.
The only other option is though, sometimes you can get your like neighborhood library to do interlibrary loan, but I don't know if that means they're gonna pack everything away while they remodel and then you can't interlibrary loan either.
So
that's just a thought. Maybe we could try that.
Okay. It's an
But
idea.
Brittany, we still can have a field trip somewhere. I don't know where, but somewhere.
Someday. Especially to that architectural salvage place, and we'll all come home with doorknobs and random window frames we definitely didn't need but fell in love with.
Right.
I'm all for that.
So the lights we bought for our house, they're going to be, he's going to be refurbishing them for the next, he's already been working on them for about a month, probably another month, maybe more. But then the hallway, the front room, and the drawing room will all have period appropriate lights again instead of the ugly 70s things.
Amazing.
So I'm so tickled when that happens.
And your house is gorgeous.
Well,
so
and what's
beautiful.
neat is it's actually only costs a little bit more than going and getting a new light at Home Depot. So that's pretty cool too.
Yep. More work finding it probably than installing it.
He has when you go look at lights, he has sheds and sheds, and it's cardboard boxes filled, just piled up with old antique lights that,
Did you share his link last time?
I think so.
Do you mind to do it again?
For sure.
I know it's in the West Wash Park Neighborhood Association. I mean, with the West Wash Park History Club on Nextdoor. I know I put it up there already.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Well, so next month, Kayla said she's going to be presenting. So I'll stay tuned to hear
Woo!
what she's going to be presenting on, but we're very excited. Our new member. Kayla, do you think you're going to need potentially the whole hour?
I think it'll probably be 30 minutes. And thank you. I'm excited to be showing as well.
Awesome. If anybody has anything else that they want to sneak in for next month, let us know. I have 2 speakers. But with that, and then in April, we have Matt doing his presentation on the sports parks, right?
Right, and then also it's also how Denver played a role in the integration of baseball. There's actually some stuff I've uncovered that I think is really, really interesting. So there's a lot of stuff I'm finding. I feel excited to share it. So
Yay! Amazing. Well, it was so great to see you guys this month, and I look forward to seeing you all next month.
Yes.
all right,
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Take care.
guys. Have a
All right,
great
bye-bye.
Good day.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.